Welcome to Flourish-Meant, the podcast on living life as you were meant to, so you can flourish.
Welcome, everyone. I am delighted to have with me today Heather Iseminger, who is a self-proclaimed hoarder of words and caffeine. She holds a BA in English writing from FSU and an MA, a master's in Christian education from NOBTS. 5 days a week, Heather is in her high school English classroom with coffee in hand, surrounded by the students she adores. She is here to talk to us today about flourishing under educational pressures. Welcome, Heather. I am so happy to have you on Flourish-Meant today.
Thank you so much, Tina. It is a joy to connect with you and hopefully help students, parents, and teachers kind of maybe get off the school year on a right start and love on people.
And I know that you have a lot of insights as a teacher and as a mom on how you can better flourish, even with tremendous educational pressures. I think the pressures are greater now than they have ever been in education. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I think the pressures are there for everyone, more so than I've ever seen in the past. This is my 16th or 17th year in the classroom. I kind of lose count, but just saying that I've been in the classroom for 16, 17 years makes me a veteran teacher, which seems weird because when we were growing up, a veteran teacher would have been in the classroom 20, 25 years. And now we sometimes even consider our teachers who've been in the classroom 10 to 11 years veteran teachers because the turnover rate is so high because of the pressures. And so as a teacher, I totally understand it. I also have a type A high achieving daughter who puts an intense amount of pressure on herself to succeed in the classroom and in the real world. And so we are getting ready to enter our senior year, and the pressures of AP classes, whether to dual enroll or not, SAT, ACT scores, getting into the right colleges and getting into the right programs are just insurmountable. And then my 11-year-old son does not flourish at all in a Zoom classroom situation. So there have been parts of this last year that have been really difficult for him. And then on the flip side, for us as parents, we desperately want we desperately want our children to have the best educational experience possible. But we tend to unknowingly, I think, put a lot of pressure on our own kids because we know what it takes to get into college now. We know what it takes to succeed, and it's just a lot. It's too much, frankly, but unfortunately, it's where society's at. And so I think trying to figure all of that out is kind of where the parent, teacher, student has to be a relationship, has to be a working community together, because we're all under intense amount of pressure that basically the system or society has created for us, and we have to learn how to function within it.
So let's take that apart and go step by step with that on those 3 different levels of pressure for different groups of people and decide how would we best flourish under educational pressures for each of those perspectives, starting with the parent trying to help their student flourish. How do you help a student to flourish under tremendous pressure right now? I want to target that piece first.
Absolutely. I think I want to hit it from maybe 2 places. As the teacher, how can I help that student? And as the parent, because I do have both roles. And in my classroom, I have one particular class that is full of high achieving students. They are an AP class. But unlike many of the other AP classes I've had in the past, this entire group of students, and I actually have my students for 2 years, so that's why I'm speaking of them in this way. Like I had them last year and they're going to be in my classroom again this year. They tend to overthink and overprocess everything. They get highly stressed out about exams, about specifically AP exams, SAT scores, all of those things, and trying to continuously help my students to know that they are more than a number is something that I think is really important for us as teachers to do with our students to make sure that we are, well, and this is parents and teachers, but that we're already proud of them. That I am no prouder of my students when they walk in the door than I am when they walk out. And it's not, my pride does not change or shift based on a score. It's based on, are you working hard? Are you giving me your best when you are able to give me your best? Some days I have students that come in and they're just not able to give me their best that day. I think that we as adults sometimes forget that we are not always on 24/7, and students are the same. So I have those days where I can see that a student is just zoned out. And you know what? If it is a once in a million kind of day for that student, then I'm going to let them zone out. And I think as teachers, sometimes we have to look at our students, their emotional needs, where they are, and kind of try to meet those needs individually and as a whole. I think that one of the greatest lessons I've learned in the classroom is that a relationship with the students is more important than what I teach them. Because if I don't have a positive relationship and engagement with a student, then they're not going to learn as much from me than they could possibly learn. And so as a teacher, to help a student flourish in the high pressures of the classroom, I think bottom line, it's really important to make sure that those students know that you love them regardless of a score that they get, that you are there to champion them, that you are there to coach them and help them understand that life is more than just a score. Now, as a parent, it is a constant balance. I was just talking to a friend the other day about how even sports in high school have changed so much that if your child isn't already playing on a team or playing in a club sport or AAU or really involved in a sport, the chances of them making a high school sports team is slim to none. And that's so different from the world that I grew up in. I remember as a freshman in high school, I hopped on the softball team and I had never really picked up a bat or a glove my entire life. Now, was I a good player? No, it was terrible. I was terrible. And our team lost every single game. We were awful, but we had the best time. I learned some of the most unique experiences. And so as parents, it's really hard to be in this world now and know that if my child loves sports, and I do have two very athletic children, that I have to kind of help them succeed much earlier on than I think their minds and their bodies are ready to. And on top of that, try to help them navigate school where college is important. But I found that the thing that has helped me the most as a parent of two children is to really pull back and focus on what is it that God wants you to do in your life. And his purpose, his goal is for you to love him with your whole heart and your whole mind, and then also to serve him. And so how does God want you to serve? And with my daughter, specifically right now, just because we're heading into college decisions and things like that, she's always known that if God has called her somewhere else, whether it's the mission field after high school, or whether it's trade school, or whether it's college, that we're going to support that 100,000 bazillion million %. That it is more important for us that she's successful in God's eyes and not in what society stands for. And I think that is the best thing that we can do for our children, is not expect college just because that's what society says they have to do, but to help our children navigate, where does God want you after high school? What does he want you to do? And it's those daily yeses that I hope and pray maybe take some of that pressure away from our students and away from our own children. I'm fortunate enough to work in a Christian school, so I can have some of those same conversations with my students. But I am constantly faced with students over and over and over again that have an overwhelming amount of pressure from their parents to get the straight A's, to go to a top university. And the focus is on financial success and not success that God would have for each individual child and each individual student. And that's really hard to watch. It's hard to watch when you have a student that may have a passion in one area, but the parents are like, no, no, that doesn't fit our mold of what you're supposed to be, or our mold of what society says you're supposed to be. And so I think constantly going back to God's desires for our children should trump anything that society says is right. And I pray that with both of my kids, that has helped take some of the pressure off of them. I think that that's it in a nutshell, is helping them to find God's design for their life and not so much what a test score should be to get into a specific college.
I want to pick that apart really quick, just to say that I love those little nuggets that you brought in there. But it's in the student's best interest to see themselves as more than a number, to see themselves beyond just a level of worldly standardized performance on a
Absolutely.
test or on a grade on their report card, and helping the parents to understand how to esteem their child for who they are, not just what they do, is incredibly important for that child to learn to develop that spiritually centered esteem about who they are and whose they are, not just
Absolutely.
how they perform and what they do day to day. That's a bigger picture kind of thing. And it's also seeing that child for where they are emotionally and what they need the most, not just what they need academically, which always
Absolutely.
must trump the academics. So that's what I'm hearing you say about the child and the child's needs, whether it's a young child or a teenager. They need to be seen for who they are and their potential as a human being, not just for their immediate right now scores on something. And they also need to be seen for how you can help them get over emotional hurdles, or simply be patient with them and gracious unto them and kind, so that they can get over those emotional hurdles that they might be in the moment, that are keeping them from moving forward in the academic realm, because it's a bigger issue. It's a crisis in their life.
It is. It is. It's funny. Sometimes you have those moments in parenting where you know that God just moved through you, because you as a parent would not have reacted this way. And I'll never forget my son. Gosh, he was probably 4 or 5, maybe 5. And he was playing, I think, coach pitch baseball. And he has since discovered that baseball is not his thing. But at the time, he was so excited. He was going up to bat and he's like, Mom, if I hit this ball, will you take me to get a popsicle? And in that moment, like, our gut reaction would be, sure, absolutely, But it was like God stopped me. And I'm so grateful that he did, because my response, and this is how I know it was God, was, dude, I'm going to take you to get a popsicle, whether you hit the ball or not. And I think that applies, because he was going to try his hardest, right? Like, he was going to do his best. And if his best wasn't good enough for a hit, what does it say to our kids when their best isn't good enough for straight A's and we get disappointed in them? I think that it's constantly asking our children for excellence, but knowing excellence is different for every kid. Sometimes excellence for some kids is going to be the straight A's, because that's what they're capable of. Sometimes excellence for some of our children is going to be a BC student, but maybe they're phenomenal in coding on a computer or working on cars, and they get engines like nobody else's business. And so I think focusing on those types of things is so key and so important. It's not whether you hit the ball or get straight A's, it's who you are as a person and celebrating a work ethic more than anything.
I think it's important, having been a therapist in the school system before, I know that when a child isn't performing to their full potential, they're able to make the A's or they're able to make the C's, and they're not making what they could be doing, there's usually a reason. So looking deeper
Absolutely.
to find out what that is about and addressing that
Absolutely.
with them, taking that time as a parent is super important for the development of that child to be able to fulfill their potential now and later.
100%. Absolutely. I think that, sometimes it's maybe a learning either disability or maybe some processing issues. You might have a brilliant student who maybe something doesn't translate correctly in the classroom. Other times it might be just a period of life where they've maybe faced some trauma or some family issues. We've got a society of hurting teens and hurting children. And so oftentimes that glazed over look that I find in classrooms is there's almost always something deeper going on, that if you don't acknowledge it and you just ignore it, whether it's as a parent or as a teacher, then that student is going to continue to feel defeated. But they need champions from both parents and teachers to really know that they're loved anyway. And sometimes that's the best thing you can do, sometimes just love on that kid.
Absolutely. And you want to notice if that child is going through bullying or if they happen to be
Right.
depressed, even if it's mildly
Right.
depressed. If you can catch that early, that may be what's going on with that child. What looks like lazy, what looks like apathy could be that they are overwhelmed with so much stress and pressure that they don't even want to try.
Oh,
Or they have a
absolutely.
fear issue. Fear is so big right now. Anxiety is a growing issue at an exponential rate among younger people and children and teens and very young adults.
Absolutely. I think what I'm seeing is almost an epidemic in so many students right now is they stop trying because if they fail, then that failure is because they didn't try. But their biggest fear is trying and then failing at whatever they've tried. And so they stop trying because then they can blame it on something other than themselves, other than their intellect or capabilities. And I think that that's where we have to try to create the shift in our students, that failure is actually what breathes growth. And so if we as teachers or parents are too hard on the failures or the mistakes of our children and our students, then they're gonna stop trying, because what happened when they tried and didn't achieve that score that mom and dad wanted, or that score that the teacher thought was where they should be? It's a delicate balance for sure. It's hard.
So, for parents and teachers that grew up under that pressure of needing to succeed in order to have worth and value, which many of us did, how do you suggest they retrain themselves to then begin to respond to that appropriately in a way that's going to foster and cultivate a success mindset for their kids, an esteemed mindset for their kids so that they can become their own best?
Oh, gosh, that's hard. I think I was fortunate, and the pressure that I felt more than anything for me was a pressure I put on myself to succeed academically, socially, because I had such a desperate desire to fit in. And I think that fitting in looked like academic success to me. It looked like going to the right college and doing the right things. And so I put an intense amount of pressure on myself, and was voted most likely to succeed even as a senior in high school. And that kind of haunted me, right? Because here I was going to college. I didn't declare a major until halfway through my junior year of college, because I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I had enough English classes that I was like, well, I guess this will allow me to graduate on time and I can always teach. But in our society, successful equates financial success. It equates jobs like being a lawyer, a CEO, or all of these like doctors and all of these like high esteemed jobs. And so there I was, a writing major who felt like, I was never going to be the next great American novel writer, but I was voted most likely to succeed by my peers in high school. And I ended up being a teacher by default, and that's another story for another day. And I felt less than. I felt like I was not who I was supposed to be. And yet I was exactly who God wanted me to be. And so I think talking about those pressures, whether they're pressures that we put on ourselves or whether they're the pressures placed on us by our parents, getting to a place where we are humble enough or humbled enough to go, you know what, God, most likely to succeed is something that man deems as an honor, but I'd rather please you. And I think that it's a process. It's not something that happens overnight. It's taking those thoughts that you have come in and go, oh, you're just a teacher, or oh, you're just a whatever. Oh, you just work in an office, work in a restaurant, whatever we tend to I guess define as successful or unsuccessful for ourselves. It's taking those thoughts and saying, no, I'm exactly where God wants me to be today. And that is how I need to redefine success. And I think that maybe learning how to redefine success as staying in God's will and being missional in whatever kind of job or school or position that he puts us in is having a mission mindset that says, you know what, I'm here, whether I like this job or whether I like this class or whatever it is, I'm here, most importantly, to follow out God's plan for my life. And that needs to determine success, not what society views as successful. And I think when we as parents can realize that the stay-at-home mom is a success when she's staying at home because that's what God's called her to, and she invests in the life of her child. And when we can get to there as adults, only then I think can we authentically help our children to get to the same place. And so, like I said, that it's a journey. It's not easy, but continuously realizing, you know what, I'm not here to please the world. I'm not here to be successful in the world's eyes. I'm here to be missional and to put everything I've got into following God's will and saying yes to him on a daily basis. That's how I need to define and determine success. I think that's what you have to do. And sometimes it's a daily chore for sure.
We need to embody valuing the spirit, the integrity of the person above performance and accomplishment. If we don't model that for them, then we're not going to be able to authentically communicate that.
Absolutely. Something I often tell both of my children when they get ready to go into a test, or my daughter does ballet before she goes into a performance, or my son basketball. There are two things that I often tell them. And the first is, I just love watching you fill in the blank. I love watching you dance. I love watching you play basketball. I love to watch how hard you work. And then the second thing that I try to make sure that I tell them is that I am already proud of you, period. At the end of the game, am I going to be excited if you scored baskets? Of course I'm going to be excited, but that's not why I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you because of the effort and the character that you've built to get to the point where you can make baskets. And I think that takes some of the performance anxiety away. And a lot of us are parents of students that are high achievers. And it's sometimes their junior or senior year of high school before they get to a class that's actually difficult. And suddenly we've got our students coming home with a C on a paper where they may have always gotten A's before, and realizing that sometimes new skills take effort and it takes growth. And that if they're learning a new skill, sometimes that C is okay. I think understanding that, especially those of us who have students who it just seems to come easy for them, and then all of a sudden it's not, we have to do a mental shift as a parent and go, well, maybe it's not easy because this subject is actually hard. And they're going to have to learn a new way of learning. They're going to have to learn a new way of studying maybe for this test or this concept. And so rather than immediately getting onto our students or our children because they might get a C or a D or even a low B. Like I have parents that get frustrated by Bs, and it's taking a step back and go, okay, well, So tell me why. What went on in this particular essay or this particular test where you got a C? Because I saw you studying and I saw you working hard, but there's a disconnect. So let me help you with that disconnect. Instead of yelling at our kids or I can't believe you got a C on this. How did you get a C? It's the way that we approach those mistakes that help our students know that we're safe, help our children know that they are safe to come to us with their mistakes. Because then what happens is your high achieving students will just cheat because they're like, I'm going to get in trouble at home and I need to do well because I need to get into a good college. And so I'm going to cheat on this. And then they don't learn anything anyway. And I have actually found that it's your high achieving students that struggle with cheating more than your low achieving students. And I think that's part of why is the parent doesn't look at the parent and the teacher sometimes don't look at who the student is and that they are a person and then they're not going to get it right every time.
Sounds like cultivating that sense of values and relationship, how to be the person you're supposed to be and relate in the ways that you're supposed to relate with other people is more what we're doing as parents and teachers than simply imparting knowledge, which may or may not be useful long term. But the relational
Absolutely.
issue and the character issue and learning how to fail forward and be resilient to challenges rather than devastated by them is everlasting. That is something they can absolutely use every day for the rest of their lives.
That's right. That's right.
So we're coming to
Absolutely.
the end of our time and you've got so much to offer. I just want to ask if there are any final tips that you would offer to parents, to students, and to teachers as they embark on the start of their school year.
Final tips. For the parent, I would say have high expectations for your children with an overwhelming amount of grace and challenge your kids to be their best selves, but understand being their best selves may not look like what society says is best. And to challenge our children to love God and follow Him wholeheartedly, whether that means into a college classroom later in life or into a trade. It doesn't matter if it's God's plan. That would be the biggest thing that I would say for parents. For students, and I speak about teens a lot just because I teach teens, but even for the young ones, I think for them, because they're the ones that are walking through it, the biggest piece other than steeping your life in a daily walk with the Lord would be don't be afraid to fail. That failure oftentimes is the only way we grow. And if you can make a mistake and then learn from it, that is a huge key to understanding the world around you. And then as teachers, I think if I could encourage teachers to do one thing more than any other thing is to look at each individual student and love them wholeheartedly, unabashedly, because a loved student is going to learn in your classroom. And so when that student becomes more important than the lesson, your classroom is going to be a safe place where students are going to feel free to make mistakes. And in that, growth happens. So those would be some key pieces of advice.
Those are brilliant insights. I'm so grateful to you for bringing those to Flourish-Meant today. How can people find you online and stay connected with you and follow you and benefit from all that you have to offer?
Absolutely. I am on Instagram and Facebook primarily as far as social media outlooks. You can find me on Facebook if you search Heather Burgess Iseminger. And I know that's a mouthful, but I'm there, as well as Heather Iseminger on Instagram. Those are two places that I tend to hang out in a lot. I have a blog. I have a lot of really important content for parents and teachers there, and it's petalsofjoy.org. And it's petals like flower petals, PETALS, petalsofjoy.org. So those would be the three places you can find me most easily.
Those of you who are listening, I hope that you enjoyed this conversation that I had with my friend Heather. And I also hope that you come back for the next episode of Flourish-Meant.